I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to discuss Zack Steffen's performance this season with the Colorado Rapids, as well as his chances of breaking back into the USMNT roster. We'll also talk through the other U.S. internationals who are playing for the Rapids this season: Djordje Mihailovic, Reggie Cannon, and Sam Vines. To help me do all of that, I've invited Braden Nurse to join the show. Braden is the Colorado Rapids beat reporter for the Denver Post. Braden, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk some PIDs, and yeah, it's been a great season, so I'm looking forward to it.
The Rapids have had a great season, and I've been super excited to talk with you about Zack Steffen because I don't watch a lot of Rapids games, but I've always been keeping my eye on Zack Steffen because I've just from his time playing for the U.S. men's national team, I'm really interested in him as a player. And there's times where what I see looks pretty good, where I'm thinking, yeah, he's having a good season. There's other things I see where I think, okay, maybe not so much. And so I wanted to start with that. Based on what you've seen so far this season, do you think Steffen is having a good season or has had a good season?
Absolutely. It started out a little bit rocky, but this Leagues Cup run has really solidified his spot as, I would say, a top 10 keeper in the MLS. Definitely, I think I would say, maybe a top 5 in the U.S. men's national team pool right now. I don't know if any call-ups will come of that, but we'll see. But the Leagues Cup run is definitely something that should not be ignored. Fully deserved the Leagues Cup goalkeeper of the tournament, whatever that trophy's called. But yeah, 100% deserved. He's had an incredible season. Again, a little rocky to start, but he's really kicked it on.
Tell me about the rocky start. What happened there?
Well, I don't think it was all his fault. The Rapids have given up a lot of goals, and that's just kind of natural with their play style. They leave themselves vulnerable at times with their counterattack and their counter press, or their press. So it leaves the defense a little bit vulnerable. There were some times where Zack Steffen would have some questionable mistakes. Maybe would watch something go by him that he probably could have gotten to, or just had not great positioning at times. But he's really kicked it up. And you could really see it a few games before Leagues Cup started. And I talked to him about it too once he started the Leagues Cup run, where he was getting, 10 saves, 8 saves, 7 saves a night on a game-to-game basis. And he said, yeah, most of it was, a lot of it was injury, because when he was at Man City and Middlesbrough, he was injured. He missed anywhere between 6 and 12 months, which really put, a damper on him. It was a knee injury, so there's a lot of rehab involved in that and a lot of mental strain on that as well. And that's something that really changed during the Leagues Cup run, was his mental. He told me, and I wrote a story about it as well, he was overthinking a lot in the beginning of the season. And when Leagues Cup started, Chris Sharp, the goalkeepers coach at the Rapids, who is a really great guy and probably one of the best goalkeepers coaches in the MLS, they kind of agreed, like, yeah, we should just take a step back, play as you do, and not think about it too much. Play like you're a 5-year-old kid again, like you love the game like that. So once that happened, the story writes itself. Zack Steffen is the hero in, if I remember correctly, 3 penalty shootouts during the tournament. So, or maybe 4.
Yeah. Was that, you talk about this Leagues Cup being a real turning point, mm-hmm. and even like the few games beforehand. Was it the penalty saves that really stood out, or was it his play and regulation as well?
In regulation,
what did you see during that Leagues Cup?
In regulation, you really could see a more free Zack Steffen. There was a moment, I believe it was against Club Leon in the second game of the group stage of Leagues Cup. He had a one-on-one that he ended up winning with a Leon player. And this Leon striker is a good striker. He should score that every time. But you could tell, that's not something that probably would have happened at the beginning of the season. And after that, I think it was the same game or the game out. Yeah, it was the Leon game. He had that penalty shootout. Somebody converted a Panenka on him during I think in the first or second penalty attempt. He admitted to us
That's
that
never good.
Yeah, he admitted to us that he didn't like it, and that's something that can get in a goalkeeper's head, but it didn't. Leon brings their best penalty shooter for the very last one, and he ends up catching it fully. So that was a kind of an FU, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. I mentioned that, from afar, I saw some things that made me say, yeah, he's having a great season. Like I knew the Rapids are having, a great season. He's starting week in, and week out. But I also saw some things when I would check some of the goalkeeping stats. It wouldn't look so good. And so I think that's why that's why I really wanted to kind of talk with you about it, because it wasn't clear to me. I do want to ask you about maybe a few of these stats, what you think. I have a few in my notes here, total goals against. He was third worst in MLS. Goals saved, he was sixth best. And part of this, I think, is because he's one of the few goalkeepers that have played in every single game so far the MLS season. I think there's only been 4 other goalkeepers that have played all those games, and so you're going to get more saves, you're going to allow more goals, the more games you played. And those are both just from MLS.com's website. On FOTMob, they have this goals prevented
post shot XG
stat. Yeah, and he's worst in the league.
Yeah.
At minus 10.6. But then goals per 90, he was 10th in the league, which says something about, what he's doing each game compared to everyone else. So I don't know. Do you have a feel for why he doesn't look so great, in some of those statistical areas?
Yeah, again, I point back, and I don't know how much this affects the stat, but the Rapids do give up a lot of goals, and that's just a counter product or a byproduct of their style of play. And there were points in the season where they'd let a goal by and it'd be like, Zach, you should be saving that. But I will point out, what was the goals prevented number?
Minus 10.6.
Okay, I think it was minus 9 point something in the weeks leading up to Leagues Cup. So you take that from that portion of season to now, then that's a really good improvement. He's still...
well, no, I think the more negative is the worst.
Right, but minus 9 in the first part of the season.
Oh, yeah, you're saying,
okay,
I mean? It hasn't continued to, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, yeah, okay.
So it certainly has improved at that point. And yeah, I've talked to different people around the club, and they were not happy with that stat being pointed out, because mainly, and you can bring that stat up as something, that Zack Steffen needs to improve on, or there's areas of improvement. There always are. But there's other areas of the game that Zack Steffen really contributes to, and that's his leadership, that's his vision, both of which have gotten much better. He's a little bit of a timid guy speaking to, but he's a real voice on the field. Guys look up to him. So it goes deeper than just, the goalkeeping part of it.
Yeah. No, that's. I'm glad you pointed that out, because so that means basically since League Cup, he's kind of had a more break even, more or less, which does show improvement. And these are, these expected goal, any type of expected goals type of stat is going to have a little bit of subjectivity around it. So, is he? You mentioned the leadership. Is he the captain of the team typically?
No, that would be Keegan Rosenberry, the right back.
Okay.
But if Keegan Rosenberry is subbed off the pitch, it's a good bet that Steffen will take that. And he has worn the armband a couple times this season as well.
Okay. Well, let's talk about his U.S. men's national team prospects. I mean, here's a guy that I don't know, what are we, maybe 5-6 years ago, he was kind of the number one goalkeeper without any question, and slowly with all the injuries that you mentioned, he's kind of been on the outside looking in for a while. I can't remember the last time he's been called in to a camp. Does he talk much about that, around his ambitions to try and get back into the team, and How's he feeling about that?
Yeah, that's definitely a goal of his. It's something that he thinks should happen in the near future. And I've talked to him before. He was disappointed in not being called up for Copa America, but I think that was fair at the time. That was before the Leagues Cup run, and there were, I think, better options at the time. But now this goalkeeper position for Pochettino's new team, it's wide open. And I think Zack Steffen should be in the conversation. He's played his heart out, especially during Leagues Cup. And yeah, there was a camp right after Leagues Cup as well that he wasn't invited to. And I kind of wonder, I need to follow up on this, but I kind of wonder if that was just because of the volume of games he had in August. I think it was 7, 8, maybe 9 games in that calendar month, which is a lot for anybody. So maybe they were just giving him time to rest, and that was before Pochettino came in and was fully announced anyway. So a little bit of a question mark there, but the goalkeeper position's wide open on the U.S. men's national team, and Zack Steffen, I think, should be in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wide. It's definitely wide open. Wide open. New coach.
Mm-hmm.
When this roster gets announced, this is one of the things I'm most excited to see, because you have no idea who Pochettino values from that group. I mean, you mentioned earlier you thought he was, I believe you said, top 5 goalkeeper in MLS. You think he's kind of returned to form? You got a cat joined us. Your cat joining our podcast.
He loves to make an entrance.
Yeah, but you mentioned you thought he was like he's kind of top 5 MLS goalkeeper, and that's kind of what I think a lot of people expected when they saw him go to Colorado Rapids and return to MLS from Europe. What are you seeing that makes you say he's one of the elite goalkeepers now in MLS?
Well, I think I want to go back. Golly, this cat. Sorry. I want to go back to kind of the disappointment that people had with his stats in the beginning of the season. I think that was kind of coupled with high expectations, because like you said, people were expecting him to be at this level when he came back, and he was injured. He didn't play much at Man City. He played maybe, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he didn't play all that much for Middlesbrough either before he got hurt. So that I think the expectations were not met, and people kind of freaked out about it. But you just see it. He's more acrobatic. He's more reactive. You can see he plays more freely. And those things, the Rapids gave up 3 goals to Minnesota United the other night, but he had 7 saves. And most of them were, decent saves. And those are the kind of things the Rapids could give up, 4, 5, 6 goals if Steffen's not in goal. And he's somebody that can, keep his team in a game. Like I'll go back to last week's game versus Kansas City, where the Rapids got beat 4-1. It was only 1-0 at halftime, and that was because of Zack Steffen, like 100% in my eyes. They ended up losing 4-1, I know, but he keeps the team in games, and I think that's something that only elite goalkeepers do.
Okay. Well, I'm cheering for him. I've always liked Zack Steffen, and
great
honestly,
guy.
Felt kind of heartbroken about what kind of happened to him by missing the World Cup, and would love to at least see him get another shot back in camp, to prove himself.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you about another guy, another U.S. international playing for the Rapids. You guys have a ton of them now over there.
It's starting to become a refuge.
This off season, I was like, wow, they're really kind of going for it with these U.S. internationals. But the next guy I want to talk about is Djordje Mihailovic, who seems to be having a great season: 11 goals, 13 assists. Yeah. Can you just talk about the season he's having and how impactful he's been for the team?
Well, simply put, Djordje Mihailovic is the key to unlocking the Rapids offense. And he's a good enough defender as well in that press. Rafa Navajo is in front of him on the high press, and he's the best presser on the team, no doubt. But, Djordje provides an option defensively as well. He tracks back when he needs to. Let's see. I think the goal contributions speak for themselves. He broke the Colorado Rapids single season record for goal contributions, originally set by Diego Rubio in 2022, pretty recent. But yeah, and his service as well. There's a reason that the Rapids have the most set piece goals in the league right now. I'm not actually sure if that's still the case, but it has been for most of the season. And that's all, unlocked by Djordje Mihailovic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's another guy that he's been kind of in and out, of the U.S. men's national team. I mean, I know he went to the Olympics. He was the, kind of one of the main, one of the overage players there. Is that something that he speaks much about? Is trying to get back in? I mean, I'm sure he wants to get back in the team, but is that something you hear him speak about very often? What does he say?
Not very often. Djordje's, I don't want to call him a weirdo, but he doesn't like to talk that much. He's a little bit awkward in a different way than Zack Steffen is.
Okay.
But yeah, it definitely is something that he wants to do. He loved the Olympics experience. I mean, who wouldn't after the goal that he scored on that free kick? And, he's goal dangerous on set pieces too, which, was proved by that. And he had a winner against LAFC from about 20 yards out as well earlier this season. But yeah, it is definitely something that he wants to get back to. He's spoken about it rather briefly, but that's just Djordje.
Does he seem happy in MLS? Because he's a guy that, a lot of people would say he went over to Europe and it didn't, work out for, whatever reason. Now he's back in MLS. Does he seem happy, content to be playing for the Rapids, playing in MLS?
Oh, yeah. And I think the moment that summed it up, I don't know if you condone cussing on your podcast, Frank.
Go ahead.
But that, the legendary quote after the Rapids beat Club America, they aired it on Apple TV on MLS Season Pass when he takes the camera and goes up the fucking pids. So that, I think that really sums it up. He loves it here. He loves Chris Armas. He loves the culture, and ultimately he loves winning.
Okay. And so then another guy I want to talk about is Reggie Cannon. I know he's only been there a couple weeks. If I remember correctly, he was a September signing, but it looks like he's already playing. I mean, what have you thought about Reggie Cannon so far since he's arrived?
Well, he scored in his home debut, so you can't fault that. Not very many goals from defenders this year. So to see him do that in his first game at Dick's Sporting Goods Park was really encouraging to see. I wasn't at that game, but I will say that he does provide some more width and more attacking prowess to the team. He provides a lot of physicality, and he's quick. He does, like, his running form. He doesn't look quick, but he's quick. He's really fast. His positioning's good. And this is all, we don't have a very big sample size for him yet, but to see him do this, I mean, when he left QPR, they were still in the middle of preseason. So to see him, putting in 30, 45, 60-minute shifts is really encouraging. And to see him score in his home debut was really cool too.
Yeah. So how do the Rapids have him playing, or how do they play their fullbacks, in general? Are they expecting a lot of attacking going forward from their fullbacks? Yeah,
and that's what you can really get from guys like Reggie Cannon, Sam Vines, and Keegan Rosenberry's been pretty good in attacking moves as well. And that's why the Rapids are left vulnerable in defense, but that's another conversation. But yes, definitely they do get up and attack. You'll find them overlapping a lot. Underlapping at times, whatever the situation calls for. But yeah, that's something that Reggie Cannon can do.
Okay. I mean, he's another guy that, he wasn't as entrenched with the USMNT as Zack Steffen was, but I remember, World Cup qualifying 2018, him being a regular, in the lineup. And then all of a sudden I think he actually missed out on the World Cup maybe because of injury, but he disappeared, and you haven't seen him, in a long time. So, and that's a position that the U.S. men's national team doesn't have a lot of depth at, is outside back right now. So, it'd be real interesting to see, if he gets a shot.
Absolutely.
I know Pochettino, he made a point in his press conference to kind of call out that all American players, I don't care, what league you're in, if you're performing, we'll be watching you.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
So there hasn't been, a typical men's team roster now, 23 players. There might only be one or two MLS guys even in there. I'm curious to see if Pochettino brings in more MLS players in his first camp, which we should be finding out who that roster is in the next few days. I'm wondering if he brings more guys in, and then if people like Djordje Mihailovic, who have been performing well, Zack Steffen performing well, can make it in.
No, I certainly hope so. I know the Rapids certainly hope so, and I know Steffen and all the guys certainly hope so. And it'll be interesting to see. And the Rapids have enough attention on them; they're performing well enough that they should be given a look.
One last guy I wanted to kind of just briefly mention or talk about is Sam Vines.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like he's currently injured, but is that true? Is he out due to injury now? And just can you maybe just talk about what you've seen from him this season?
Yeah, so he picked up a knock during the Leagues Cup third place game against Philly. He had to come out early. And usually, all the defenders typically play 90 minutes. So that's a lot of mileage on those legs. But he didn't pull. He picked up a hamstring injury. We don't know much other than that, but we do know that it's a repeat injury that kept him out when he was at Antwerp for quite some time. I think he missed. You'd have to fact check me, but I think he missed a leg of a cup final because of this injury back in Antwerp. But yeah, he hasn't played since then. I do know that he's practicing fully, and the Rapids have been very cautious with him because they don't want to aggravate that, especially going into the playoffs. But that's why you bring in a guy like Reggie Cannon, because the other outside backs that you have, not that they're bad, they're just inexperienced. Jackson Travis, the rookie, and Sebastian Anderson, the young homegrown who hasn't got that much run. But yeah, again, that's why you bring in a guy like Reggie Cannon to kind of supplement that and give another option in case the mileage catches up with the outside backs.
Has Vines been performing well this season before the injury, or have you been happy with him? Has he been impactful?
This might be another case of high expectations, but honestly, I have not been very impressed with Sam Vines. When it comes to defending, and he's not a pure defensive outside back. He likes to get up into the attack, and that's what works so well, say, in 2021 when the Rapids topped the Western Conference. That's what helped a lot. I believe they ran a five in the back with two wing backs in that year, and that was a big part of why Sam Vines did so well, and that's part of why the Rapids did so well that year. In Chris Armas's system, it's not exactly the same. Obviously, they have four in the back, and that kind of leaves a guy like Sam Vines a little bit vulnerable when he's outside defending one-on-one, particularly against top MLS wingers like Denny Bawanga, Bogusz when he's out there. I know I'm naming LAFC guys, but it's hard not to. But you know what I mean. But yeah, Sam Vines, he's been okay in the attack when he gets up. Very inconsistent for me, and he knows that as well. He's talked before about not performing to the standard that he wants to, and he's taken accountability for it, which I think is good, but I haven't seen an improvement, to be honest.
Okay. Well, last thing I want to ask you about, I've given you four U.S. internationals we've talked through, and I want to know who's your MVP of the season between those four guys for the Rapids. Which U.S. international do you think has performed the best?
It has to be Djordje Mihailovic. I mean, he was an Olympian for a reason. As an overage player, it's even harder to get into that pool. But it really was for a reason. He's got, what did you say, 11 goals and 13 assists. It's insane, the level that he's playing at. Again, he's the key that unlocks this entire system. If Djordje Mihailovic is not on the field, then it's really not the same team, and I don't say that lightly. So it would definitely be him. And he's definitely, although he's I hate to say timid, but although he doesn't talk much, he's kind of for lack of a better term, he's the funny guy on the team. The personality. So yeah, definitely him. Vibes guy for sure.
All right. Well, a lot of big games coming up for the Rapids. They're going to be in the postseason for sure, and so it'll be exciting to see these guys all playing in big games.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Braden, so much for being on the show. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at Braden Nurse, and also to your work at the Denver Post. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Frank. I appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.